you. I have to breathe so I don't start crying. Okay. How to turn this wonderful work that you've done for your annotated bibs into a lit review is definitely a process, and I think what I love about this handout that was the reading for today is that it definitely makes the distinction between what an annotated bibliography is, which is it's focused on the actual references, reference by reference, like this reference was about this is how I think it's relevant or useful, or this is my critique of it, or these are the strengths or whatever. Whereas a literature review is really centered around a number of things as they outline, but for our purposes it's going to be mostly around topics. So what are the different topics that you're addressing in your study, and how does the literature help you to contribute to that broader conversation? Because the way that I like to think about all lit reviews is that they are a conversation among researchers. When you're citing someone, it's almost like you're saying, oh, like my friend so-and-so mentioned, and just last week when I was talking to this person, it's like literally the conversation. And so you can organize it in a number of different ways, like around, what kind of methods make sense or whatever. But most of you all are going to be writing a lit review that's focused on your different topics. So then the issue is, and again, I think this article really does a beautiful job. Like, I don't think I could do a better job of sort of breaking it down of like how do you go through it step by step. But basically, you're creating a narrative, you're creating a storyline. And I know that many of you were concerned about the articles not really necessarily being like that connected to each other, but that's your job. Your job is to tell the story, because the reason you pulled them out is because they felt relevant to you, right? And that's what you were writing about in your summaries. Like, I think this is important because of whatever. Well, as the storyteller in writing the lit review, you are telling that story. You're creating the narrative and saying, related to this topic, these are the important ideas that have been put out there. However, we still don't know about this, or we still don't know about that, or we have these 3 articles that focus on this and these 4 articles that focus on that, but there's sort of like something missing in between or whatever. And so you're really the storyteller of how these pieces fit, and you're really not doing one paragraph is all one article and the whole summary of it. What you're taking from your annotated bibliography is actually probably pretty limited at the end of the day. You're not like copying and pasting giant chunks. That's for yourself. The annotated bibliography we create for ourselves so that we have a sense in our own minds of where we're going and what the literature is saying. But, for the most part, you might have like a line or 2 about each of your articles, in the actual lit review. So the 10 is a starting point, right? You'll probably end up getting much more.
No, so I was going to ask, so some of the articles that I pulled, because I finally finished finding them yesterday, I had really struggled. Some of them were only relevant, like, for a small paragraph, so it would be like, so it was like, how do I explain this? One of the articles was saying that they leave with a comprehension level of 4th grade and then entering college. I think when they're leaving, they're about 9th grade comprehension level, stuff like that, and the importance of early intervention. So would that small portion still be relevant even though I'm only focusing on that instead of the whole article?
Yeah, you just pull out, you would just pull out exactly what you just pulled out. That's what's relevant. That's what's important. So in your annotated bibliography, you'll have more details because you'll want to remind yourself what the methods were. And a lot of people found, for example, that in reading their articles, there were some, methods and tools and measures that they found useful. So instead of having to, like, once you sit down to write it up, you don't want to have to guess and figure out, like, where did I read that and what was that measure? This is a way for you to, it's like you're note taking, you have it all condensed there, but you're not going to use every bit of it.
Okay. As I was doing this, I was like a little bit unsure because I'm not because I'm doing a review of methods and then practice versus like methods versus practice. Sometimes I felt like I wasn't arguing anything. Like some have like an argument or something that they're trying to prove, but I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to like walk in and see what was going on. So I felt a little like, well, what's the argument? Article? Well, there's no, like, my articles weren't arguments. They were saying, like, this is what we set out to do, and, like, was it effective or not? And obviously, a lot of times they said, yes, it was. Some of them had, like, caveats to it, but still. So in writing a lit review, I'm a little unsure as to how to proceed. Like, should my lit review be, like, a review of the methods that I'm going to include in my survey, you know, sandwiched in by, you know, the criteria for diagnosis, and on the other side, like, where I think the research should go next? Or so am I doing it, is that, like, essentially, is that what I'm supposed to be writing? Because I'm a little confused.
Well, okay, so in social science, our arguments are a little bit different than arguments as if you're writing, like, for literature. But it's still an argument. Because a research article is basically trying to convince you or make a point about something in particular. It's like saying this method is effective, or this method was not effective, or when using this method, these are the different things that should be considered, right? That's kind of the argument that they're making. They're saying our method, our intervention is good, bad. These interventions are good, bad. When using these interventions, you should only use them with these kids, or, you know what I'm saying? So the argument thing is, like, it's a little different than we're used to thinking about it, but it's more about, like, in some people make their hypothesis their argument, or in the way that they pose their research question, you can sort of see what it is they're trying to get at, because the argument is, like, what's your point? Right? So just think about it that way. If you just shift your frame a little bit, that might help you to see that these articles, they do have an argument in a sense, because they were written to make a point. Okay? So now when you're writing your lit review, you're also going to be trying to make a point. But, and your question is excellent, you don't know what point you're trying to make yet, because you don't have data yet.
Right.
So until you have your data, writing your lit review is going to be more like summary. It's going to feel, until you're going to have a story. And then when you have your story, you're going to be able to build that story, right? So you start in first drafting your lit review. It's really at this point just sort of pulling things together and figuring out, like, what is the literature saying, setting it up, you know, what do we know, what do we not know, what is the future of research. But then when you're writing your final product is going to say, like, here is my point. You know, here is the argument that I'm making. I want people to know that XYZ is important, not important, relevant, irrelevant, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to be your argument. But you won't know what that is until, right?
So
until you actually...
Okay, so so for our drafts, approximately how long should these literature... So, I don't know. Should these drafts be?
It's hard to say, because different people are going to have different amounts of publications. For a paper, I'm expecting your final product to make it, like, realistic now. Real world, if you're writing these articles to submission to a journal, they would be right around 30 pages and no more. You might have a little bit more because it's a thesis. And so you have to include your appendices and, you know, whatever. So it might be a little longer than that. So don't worry about that. But generally speaking, your final product is going to be tight, and it's going to be something that could be like, this is, you know, something similar to what I've read, like in a journal article. So if you look at journal articles as models, the lit review tends to be pretty short, because they're not trying to, the point is not to dwell on what other people have done. The point is to say, and here's my contribution, ta-da! So when you're writing a lit review for a dissertation, when you're writing a lit review for a master's thesis, you're trying to show that you have read everything that can possibly be read, and you're trying to show, like, a complete mastery of that area of knowledge, of that body of knowledge. So those lit reviews can be themselves like 40 pages. In this case, I would probably say like 6 pages, 8 pages, up to 10 pages, depending on, you know, how many sources you have, would probably be acceptable. And of course, I'll give you feedback. So if, you know, if it sort of like needs to be more fleshed out or whatever, then, you know, and if it's a little shorter, like, so I'm saying 6 to 10, but if you're at 4, don't freak out, right? Just like write it, draft it, and we'll take it from there. Okay? But it's going to vary by person, so.
Is the lit reviews different from the proposal, or it's the same thing?
The lit review is part of the proposal. Lit review is yeah, it's like intro lit review methods. That's all. So it's all together.
Okay, this is probably a really stupid question,
No.
but are we handing in the literature review?
Next
Or
week, you're bringing it with
we're
you
bringing it in
and workshopping. So we're going to break up into into pairs and read each other's drafts and give each other feedback. And I'll be reading as well. Okay, sorry, I need to figure out what's going on. Okay. Could you pause for a second?
Sure. We did last.